IVM.
Innovation often happens when someone spots a gap in a market where most don't even realize there is one. Most of these might seem obvious in hindsight, but at that moment, it's a spark of innovation. And when this gap is found in what seems to be a saturated segment of market, it becomes an even more interesting case study for us to dig into. One such company that has pushed us to rethink how we make and drink coffee is Sleepy Owl Coffee. And today I have their co-founder Arman Sood on the podcast to not just understand their journey and how he looks at the coffee landscape, but also how the problem they're actually trying to solve has nothing to do with coffee itself. I'm Varun Girala, and this advertising is dead. Be right back with Arman.
$100. That's all it takes to begin your journey with Bitcoin and Ethereum. No, really. With CoinSwitch, you can start investing in over 100 cryptocurrencies with just 100 rupees. On top of that, there are zero charges for deposits and withdrawals, so you can trade, buy, sell, however and whenever you want. All of this, plus their extremely intuitive interface, makes CoinSwitch the perfect app for beginners in the crypto space. But don't take my word for it. Just download CoinSwitch for free and try it out for yourself. If you'd like more information on cryptocurrencies, tune into a show about crypto with me, Rohan Joshi, my new adventure on IVM podcasts. CoinSwitch, kuch to badlega.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. We talked to Arman. Hey Arman, welcome to the show. We've had an interesting start to this recording. Just like note for anybody who's listening in, there are about 4 of us stuck inside an IVM studio, and exactly when we hit record, Arman's internet, which was totally fine till then, decided to kind of give in. So it's been an interesting start to this recording, but we've started this one off, and I'm super excited to chat.
Likewise, Varun, thank you for having me on today's podcast.
I want to kind of start off by kind of going to where this, especially Sleepy Owl started for you, right? Where did the interest in coffee as a space kind of kick off?
I think the interest was more in entrepreneurship and business than in coffee specifically. And I'm a law graduate. I graduated law school in 2015, and there was this desire to start up, this desire to be an entrepreneur and run a business that sparked a lot of ideas in my co-founders and my head. But we weren't sure what exactly to do, right? We narrowed down on F&B and FMCG as a space where we thought we could add value. And while looking for the next big thing in the space, we ended up narrowing down on coffee because it was a personal problem statement that we discovered we had, right? And I think most good ideas come from personal problems that you face that you want to solve. So that's kind of how coffee happened. I wasn't a coffee connoisseur or a coffee aficionado. It was just something that we identified, and we said, we could be the right people to solve this, and we jumped, head first into it, and there's been no looking back.
It's interesting you say personal, problem solving, right? Because I remember the first time I really started to. So I bought the cold brews initially, and I remember this first because I want to kind of experiment with cold brew and see what that was. But where I really started to kind of make sure I always had, the hot brews have been a part of being in my travel bag or in my work bag for the longest time, because you would go for a meeting and the place would have terrible coffee. You would travel to a hotel and hotel would have terrible instant coffee. And I would always carry the hot brew with me, just like that. I've actually been that person to go to someone else's office and pull out a Sleepy Owl hot brew bag and say, just give me hot water. I got a few weird looks initially, but I totally get it. Was a problem statement, which I think a lot of us didn't really realize was that big a problem till we actually had an option. So was that how was it similar when you said problem statement for you?
Yeah, I guess to some extent it was. And, in fact, for that product, for the hot brew especially, that was the use case that we realized, specifically for that product. For the cold brew and for when our journey began, the problem statement was broader. It was more that, people in our age group, in the 18 to 30 age group, might not be very curious to want to grind their own beans and use a French press or a mocha pot or an AeroPress, right? We grew up having instant coffee, cold coffee as a default option. And the moment we hit the workforce, my co-founders and I, our offices had vending machines, right? And your Starbucks or your CCD proved to be too expensive for a daily sort of coffee, right?
Yeah.
So we said, okay, there is a gap in this space in the in-home coffee market where the only brands that we see around us are Nestle, Starbucks, and to some extent Brew, Hindustan Unilever, and that there is a big white space there. So that's how we entered and decided to solve for coffee in general. Hot brew, we actually launched 3 years into our business, right? And for that, the use case is exactly what you portrayed. I mean, you now when you describe it, right, you are my ideal consumer doing exactly what I want you to do with that product, right? Which is take it on your travels, take it to work, have it in your bag. In fact, when we do that as well, when I go to meetings, I do the exact same thing. And they, it's this sort of Indian tradition where they say chai coffee loge, and I'm like, nahi, aap bas garam pani le aao, I'll make my own coffee. But I think the big advantage of this is you are actually marketing our product to newer and newer audiences every time you do that exercise, right? So it's a win-win for us.
So why was cold brew something that you guys focused on initially? Where did that kind of kick off?
So, two reasons for that. One is, we identified that our age group has some amount of nostalgia associated with cold coffee, right? So we felt that, it is usually the consumer that is slightly older that wants to have like a hot beverage or a hot cup of coffee or a hot chai in the morning, right? The younger generation was more used to having cold drinks and cold beverages filled with a lot of ice, right? And that's how even frappe culture or our sort of mixi mein cold coffee banane ka culture, we were that generation. When I look back, Varun, I did not have Horlicks, Complan, Bonvita growing up. For me, my parents managed to get milk into my system by adding coffee and making a cold coffee out of it. So it used to be a full glass of milk with a little bit of coffee, but it did the job for them. And I think a lot of us, cold coffee was like a delight. My co-founders Ajay and Ashwajit went to Sinar, and even at their boarding school on Sundays, it would be a thing that aaj cold coffee milne wali hai, because you don't get it the whole week, right?
It's a treat.
So we said, okay, that's what our sort of audience would relate to. And cold brew had just started becoming popular globally, right? So as people, as outsiders to, the industry altogether, we said, okay, cold brew is something that's trending in the US, in UK, and it's something that will get popular in India at some point in the future. So we kind of became first movers who jumped on to bringing that trend to India, right? And that's kind of how we, made that the center of attention, made that the focus, and launched a slew of products that revolved around cold brew. In fact, for the longest time, we were identified as strictly a cold brew brand. What we realized 3 years on in that journey is that it's an uphill battle to continuously educate the Indian consumer on what cold brew is, because cold brew is not a cold coffee. It's a method of brewing coffee in cold water, right? And we realized that the market for cold brew is very niche. It's growing nonetheless, but it's niche, right? And we needed to, cater to what consumers wanted. So hot brew is actually a consequence of customers saying, you guys have made cold brew convenient, right? And easy, but when are you doing something hot? And for us, our business is very seasonal with cold brew. And to tackle those problems, we innovated and, put coffee in a tea bag. Which we asked ourselves before doing it, like either we are really stupid or we're really smart, because no one's really done this before or thought about it. And it seemed like a no-brainer. But, we went ahead and we just did it. And I think that, hot brew today is the biggest category for us as a company. So, you have to keep, giving customers what they want, keep pivoting, keep looking at, newer and interesting things to do as a business.
When you talk about cold brew as well as I think the tea bag idea was genius in hindsight, right? Because it makes so much simpler to carry around. Because the problem always is, how do you carry coffee with you? I've had friends who've carried their mocha pots, French presses, packets of ground coffee with them. It's a pain to do all of that. So even I remember when I first started consuming a brand, I would go to your Instagram, go across the board, and a lot of your content was almost educative, like you're telling people how to, and I feel that's always interesting when you kind of found a gap, but you also need to educate. How do you guys approach that part? Like, how do you educate while still being marketable in that sense, right? Because, you don't also want to become instruction manuals, but in many ways you've said, okay, this is something which be very interesting. We know you guys will enjoy, but this is also like a way for us to engage while teaching you stuff. So how did you guys approach that part?
So, Varun, to be honest, we realized early on that if you don't educate, people will not buy your product because they won't understand what to do with it or how useful it is, right? So I think we were at that stage when Instagram and Facebook and content marketing overall was blowing up, right? So we realized that being a food and beverage company, if you have a content that is visually appealing and aesthetically eye-pleasing, right, you will be able to get someone to look at that and desire to want to taste that, right? So that was sort of our focus. That how do you make someone look at your content and drool? How do you make them want to be like, okay, wow, this looks pretty or it looks beautiful. I want to consume it, right? So the content, was part instructional and part pleasing, right? So that you kind of get the best of both worlds. Of course, like most D2C brands, along with every order, we had like an instruction manual, a note, a little card that was put into the orders. There were recipes that are shared on the product itself and recipe videos on our website that we said, okay, once you receive the product, this is what you can do with it, right? This is how you use it. And I think that really helped us, at least on the digital front, to get our message across to the customers. But one of the things that we did pre-COVID and did a lot was office tastings, food and beverage events, sampling sessions with small cohorts and small groups of people, where we actually, were able to go out and convince and talk to customers and educate them. And I think that, was driven right from the top. Like we as founders made sure that we were there doing this ourselves and educating people ourselves. Even when we started expanding into offline stores, modern trade and general trade, for many a months, our weekends were spent ourselves at a store, standing for 8 hours, talking to customers. And, it was a very humbling experience because, it's not always that you have a founder that is standing and promoting the product in a store, right?
Yeah.
So we experienced both the, hey, don't disturb me versus, wow, let's chat, right? In a store. But when we did hire promoters and samplers to get our message across, we really understood, how do we train our promoters and samplers basis our own real life experience. And I think today when you walk into a store and see a sleepy owl promoter, we've paid a lot of attention to training, right? On how they can communicate the way we would communicate. And I'm, proud to say that today, if I were to go into a store and stand with one of my, promoters who is, pretty much a 12 pass hustler, right? Man, he will outsell me, and that's amazing to feel and to know that those guys can absolutely outsell me in our own product. And it's always nice to see that. So that's how we've created the sort of awareness, education, impact both offline and online.
I think the offline online mix is also an interesting thing, right? Because obviously a lot of the D2C brands, when they kind of kick off, they also kind of, there's a period after which they realize they need to get into modern trade and kind of push that out there. This is like a two-step question here. It's saying, when you started off, what were things that you thought the consumer really was going to be like, and what did you quickly realize? And did that kind of change once you moved to modern trade, going offline as well, apart from online? So it's almost like a part one, part two to this question.
Okay, so I think I think we were very clear on who our consumer was, right? And we knew that our consumer is essentially someone who is well traveled, preferably working at a creative sort of working in a creative environment. Definitely uses Airbnb, Uber, Netflix, so on and so forth, and is savvy, right? And we identified that cohort and we wanted to market to that cohort, right? Because cold brew being something that requires that little bit of effort from a consumer to do, right? To make that coffee themselves. They need to be well aware, well traveled, have that understanding to do it. What we realized very early on, is that coffee is one of those things that while people will consume online and buy online, it's still something that could fit as a part of your daily grocery, weekly or monthly grocery list, right? And you lose out on that audience that is not purchasing online but purchasing offline. So going into at least the top modern trade and A+ stores, jisko kehte hain, it was absolutely essential, and we did that very early on. How the consumer has evolved, I think we were when we started very hopeful and bullish that the consumer would take to cold brew very easily and it would become the sort of mainstay thing. But to be honest, Varun, I think we can have that as one part of our portfolio and do that. But getting the hot brew, getting the ready to drink cold coffee, and in the near future even a premium instant coffee is something we cannot put off the table, because that's what India consumes and that's what India wants, right? Even in our surveys with our loyal customers, they always tell us that, listen, we love Sleepy Owl. It's always in our shelf, but we also have an instant coffee in the shelf, and we also have coffee beans on the shelf, because each kind of product has its own use case, right? Whereas you may be taking a hot brew bags with you to work or to your travels, but maybe the first thing you do in the morning is you want that therapeutic experience of brewing a cup yourself, right? From scratch. So each product has its use case, and we've kind of been in the business for 5 years now, and realized that it's good to have something interesting in each category. So that consumers ultimately, come back to you because of your service, your branding, your ability to, delight the customer overall.
And you bring up an interesting point, right? Because when I look at anybody else in this space, particularly, on one end, you obviously have chains who have, like, say, like you mentioned, Starbucks, CCD, that entire bunch. On the other end, you had, let's say, you have a lot of these roasteries that have kind of come up, and they're trying to put it out there. You guys are at a unique position where you saw a market gap and kind of plugged into it. With all these sites kind of scaling up, and you as well, how do you see this ecosystem kind of evolve? Are you seeing that? Because from a consumer standpoint, I'm seeing a lot more flavored coffees being marketed out there. I'm seeing, obviously there is people do want to kind of go. The experience of coffee is so different in so many different ways that it's a world to itself. You actually dig into it. But how are you seeing the larger ecosystem kind of evolve?
I think it's very exciting. So I think there is no doubt there are so many roasteries that are popping up, and there are so many people that are actually trying to disrupt Starbucks and CCD and grow in the cafe space altogether, right? So again, there are very different use cases for coffee consumption in general, right? I think firstly, I think we're still very, very early and very, very nascent in India's sort of journey with coffee, right? I think it's going to take 10, 15, maybe 20 years till we come close to the level where tea is today, right? And that's going to continue to grow as well. I think there's a very, very large pie, and there's I think a space for a lot of players to who exist today, and for more to come in as well and bring unique offerings on the table, right? I think the coffee consumer, my dad keeps saying, he's like, yeah, coffee, cigarettes, these things, once you're hooked to a particular taste, you're not going to change, right? But that I disagree. I think today's consumer, unlike, let's say, my father's generation, is very excited to explore a lot of different options, right?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Whether it's coffee from multiple different estates, whether it's flavored coffee of all kinds of flavors. I think the consumer is willing to have sort of one mainstay that they do regularly, right? And then the other which they keep experimenting with, right? So having said that, it's not that a Sleepy Owl consumer never visits a Blue Tokai or a Third Wave Coffee Roasters. We don't say that. Yeah. The use case to go there could be for a meeting, could be because you want to grab a bite along with your coffee, could be because it's located very close to your house, so on and so forth, right? So I feel like it's I don't think one brand will ever dominate the entire shelf of the consumer, right? So I think that's where the consumer is evolving, and it's good for them to have these options.
Another aspect of what you guys do, which I found fascinating, is your merch. Right, your merch is a strong. I mean, it's a strong part of your entire brand. I also want to get into why you're called Sleepy Owl in the first place. I think I'm almost like, how many times have you been asked this question? Would be my point to you, but. How is the merch part kind of? Was it almost a natural progression, or was that something you guys kind of focused on? Considering, and for people who are listening to know, your first startup in college was merch around alcohol and that entire industry. So this is almost like you taking that and saying, let's extend that out into the newer piece that you're doing.
Sweet. So I'll actually answer this why Sleepy Owl second, and I'll answer the merch bit first. So. Little bit of history. So Ashujit and I were in law school 2010 to 2015. In 2012, we kind of realized that while we are going to finish our sort of law course, we have additional time on hand in law school. So we said we want to use that time to start something, right? And this is even when Flipkart was early and there was that e-commerce and D2C had not sort of blown up yet, right? But we said, why don't we just do something, right? And karenge to sikhenge. So being young, sort of, people who love to party, loved our beer, so on and so forth. We said India might be again, there was no, market research into this. It was just a personal problem that, where are the beer pong tables and the beer bongs, and why aren't people partying like that, with all of these fun accessories? So we actually went ahead and, imported a range of party accessories, set up an e-commerce website, and we started selling all of these products online. Of course, the e-commerce infrastructure isn't what it is today in 2012, right? We really struggled, we really suffered, but we managed to liquidate most of the inventory initially B2C, and then we sold it to sort of other physical retail party stores. And 3 years, we wound that business up. But I think that was our first tryst with entrepreneurship, with actually trying to build a brand, operation, supply chain, logistics, e-commerce, the whole piece, right? We had so much fun doing that that we realized that, we will not be lawyers and we're going to be entrepreneurs, right? And we started with Sleepy Owl and, got into coffee. And I think it was during this journey where Ashujit actually, discovered what we call an enamel mug, right? An enamel mug is your army mug that's made out of metal and essentially, popular among army folks and, even travel goers to some extent, because it doesn't break, right? You can drop it and it doesn't break. So we introduced the enamel mug. We found a vendor in India itself and introduced enamel mug on our website. And it was phenomenal, Varun. People were just so excited to get a cool enamel mug, right? That it was like, it doesn't matter, and of course we built a little bit of a brand by then. So it was okay that it was Sleepy Owl branded and had our logo and stuff like that. But the Indian supplier couldn't keep up with our demand for the enamel mug, right? So we actually went out of stock of the enamel mug and we started exploring China as an option to get that. In the meanwhile, again, Ashujit said, listen, why don't we do ceramic mugs? Mugs are selling, so why don't we just do ceramic mugs instead for the time being? And we launched ceramic mugs. That too got a phenomenal response, right? And that's how gradually we said, okay, for whatever reason, like our merch does well and people are happy to sport it. And it does a dual job for us. It does drive additional revenue. It allows us to make combos of coffee with our mugs, right?
Yeah.
And then when people use this mug or take this mug, it's sort of, branding.
It's like they're paying to advertise for you. So
absolutely, right. And with that insight, we went ahead and launched our, very cool travel mug, very cool tumbler, stuff that's unique and that's not, traditionally available easily everywhere. We got a few complaints that, we love your brand and we love your logo, but it's on everything. So now we are kind of like, we're kind of doing other quirky stuff instead of pasting our logo on most of these fun products. But over the course of the last, year and a half or so, we realized that merch is a significant contributor and it will continue to be. And it's a win-win for us to have this. And we're doubling down on merch in a big way, right? So yeah, that's kind of our story with merchandise.
And how did the name Sleepy Owl come to be? How was that? I mean, I get the reasoning, but I'd love to hear the origin.
Sure. So, prior to starting Sleepy Owl, we realized very early on that the name of the brand is going to be very, very crucial in, differentiating us from what else is out there. We, looked at the coffee space and you had players like Blue Bottle, which is in the US, Starbucks, so on and so forth. And there was this sort of feeling where there's a name, but there's also a logo with the name, right? You have to have, you can create two memories for a person, right? And we said that, okay, to create those two memories, you need a catchy name and you need a catchy logo, right? So as silly as it sounds, we just narrowed down saying that we want an animal in our name, right? And then we tried to go down like, animal by animal, so on and so forth. And, we also had another weird rule that it has to be 2 words. It won't be 1 word, right? The name will have 2 words.
I'd love to know what other animals were considered in this one.
We consider tigers, bears, so on and so forth. But the owl immediately, the moment Ashujit said owl, and then he said Sleepy Owl, and I actually have a screenshot of our conversation because he was on a local train in Andheri when I got that message, and we have that snippet of conversation. I have it screenshotted even now, and the moment he said that, it was locked. I mean, there was no conversation further because we could have spent, months deliberating this. But once he said it, the first time it came out of his mouth, we were like, done. This is it. Main reason was that we realized that the owl as a mascot would be something that could be used independent of the name. And we want to get to a point where someone can look at the owl and say that is Sleepy Owl's owl, right? Of course, you used to have a food and beverage player called Tiny Owl, and then you have Wise Owl, which is a restaurant in Calcutta. You have 24/7, which is a chain which also has an owl as its Then you have a White Owl Brewery, which is the beer. So it's there's a lot with the owl, but somehow I think our name has really resonated with our audience. So, and there's another side to this was where Ashujit, and our premise of starting was that in coffee, marketing should hopefully be easier and advertising should be easier, because if there's a group of 5 friends and one of them becomes hooked to Sleepy Owl, right, he will at some point mention to his other 4 in his circle that this is what I'm consuming, this is what I'm drinking. You might not do the same for a face wash that you use or a hand wash that you use, but with coffee, it is one of those things that people like sharing with their community. And therefore, the name had to be very easy to remember. We never wanted someone to say, "Acha, yaad nahi aa raha, that is, matlab ye pee raha hu, I don't remember the name." We never wanted that. So it was very clear that the name has to be simple to be translated from one person to the next. And touch wood, it's worked out quite well for us.
I have a bunch more questions, but I know we need to go on for a break. So just going to quickly do that. We'll be right back with advertising instead.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Arshit. खाने का इतिहास, economics, policy, psychology, सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the Nankali podcast every Wednesday, सिर्फ IVM podcast ऐप या वेबसाइट पर, या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. We're still talking to Arman. One of the, you earlier spoke about how you focus on the content you're creating around the brand initially, right? Even recently, you had this one campaign that kind of went around where you just had, I'm gathering someone from your office is what I'm assuming, or someone you kind of got in who's just pointing it at different text, and that kind of went around as well. How have you guys looked at marketing on a broader space for the brand? And how has that kind of evolved over time?
So, Varun, when we started, right, we were absolutely bootstrapped, started out of our sort of little apartment in Dwarka in Delhi. And the division of labor that among the 3 co-founders, because none of us are sort of industry veterans or industry professionals, to say the least, right? Ashujit, my co-founder, has a creative bent of mind. So he said, listen, I'm going to learn how to use Instagram, set up our website, look at, the sort of communication, email, so on and so forth. And for him, it was, the learning came through, okay, where do I draw inspiration from, right? And he clearly knew in his head, okay, this is cool, this is not cool. This is cringe, this is not cringe. This is classy, this is, and he has his sort of brands that he's inspired by and wants to emulate and learn from and, give that sort of an experience to our customers as well, right? So he owns that piece 100%, packaging, design, branding, e-commerce, communication, and what the brand should look and feel like to people. I look at, supply chain operations, backend, so on and so forth. And our third co-founder, Ajay, looks at investor relations, finance, and team building. That's sort of, answered this later, but that's the division between the 3 of us. So Ashujit is the stronghold to keep the brand integrity with communication and branding the way it should be, right? So from day one, he was very clear that the only way this will sell is if it is visually appealing and if it is drool worthy in its content. If you make content that inspires and is drool worthy. So we've I know you've run a fantastic agency, but we've never worked with an agency for our social media creative content. That's something that Ashwin kept close to his heart. Even when it's been challenging and trying and we haven't been able to build early days, we didn't have the kind of illustrators, videographers, graphic designers on our team. But and at that time he would post once a week, right? And I would be like, no, Ashwiji, the whole world posts every day, and they put stories every day. Why don't we do it? I, in fact, even went to him with a calendar saying that Diwali, Holi, Children's Day, Mother's Day, you need to post on these days. And he said, Arman, for me, it's always going to be quality over quantity. And, even if I do, one piece of content in a week, it has to be the best there is, right? And I think that is the sort of principle that we've managed to continue to harp on. Of course, now we churn out a lot more content, but it's been with that principle that it always has to meet a certain standard of quality, keeping the brand guidelines, integrity in mind. And that's what, customers will appreciate and resonate with. And despite our fights and our, sort of difference in opinion, I think he's won that battle because, he's maintained a certain, tone of voice and language. And I think, a lot of times people do that much later in their journey when they can afford to, let's say, work with, really good agencies and get that sort of in place. But from very early on, we said, okay, there has to be, Sleepy Owl is not me, not Ashwajit, not Ajay, not anybody else. Sleepy Owl has its own identity, right? And that needs to come through everywhere. So whether it's our support emails, whether it's a reply to a comment on Instagram, it all has to speak that same voice. And that's the principle on which we've done it. Of course, because everything's in-house, there's a certain amount of spontaneity to it as well, right? And the video that you're talking about that, and I'll happily use the word viral here. I think everyone's trying to work towards, and we've also done it. We've tried intentionally create, try to force create something that we hope will go viral, right? But this wasn't that. This wasn't that at all. This was one of those things where, again, he was inspired by a certain piece of content that he saw online, and he said, "Wow, this is really cool." Like, the way those guys did it for their brand was really cool. But he said we can apply that concept, the concept of a mute ad. It isn't an original concept, and we don't claim it to be. But I think, everything that, you inspired by, right? We took it and we, he saw it in the morning. He came to office, dropped the calendar for the day and got our colleague to sit. And, within an hour or so, it was done and it was just pushed out. And, he went and put
those are sometimes the best kinds of content that kind of come out.
Absolutely. And, it's got us a lot of eyeballs. And I think it is a unique piece of, content for the Indian context, at least. And even globally, I think there was just one other person who'd done a sort of mute ad. It's something that, we've got a lot of positive sort of feedback for it. Of course, a lot of hate as well. Some people didn't like it. So on and so forth.
There's always that mix.
That makes me happy because I think all the best things in the world are polarizing, right? If you're liked by all, then you're definitely not doing something right.
Across this entire journey so far, what do you feel like you kind of learned? Right? Obviously, I feel that every single entrepreneurial journey teaches the founders a bunch of things, and it continues to teach you on a day-to-day basis. And what have you kind of learned through this process? And as you kind of go ahead, what you kind of hoping you'll also kind of add to that, Kitty?
Okay. So, I think one of the key things that, we've done in the last 5 years is as founders, we've taken, tons of responsibility onto our shoulders. And, we've tried to, at least, in the early days and even now, do a lot of things ourselves, right? So we're the kind of people who want to figure it out and want to learn, how to do it and execute it. While that has been immensely helpful for us to get to where we are today, I think one of the biggest learnings has been that, you don't always have to try and learn everything on your own. There are times and places and moments where you need to, either hire or go out to professionals, right? And I think in many parts of our journey, we didn't do that, right? So I think the biggest learning has been that, sometimes letting go
I couldn't agree more.
Can actually be like, the best thing you can do for your business as well. And I think, in the past, we haven't let go as much. But one of the things that we intend to do as we move forward now is let go and give the reins to people, who can come and join us on our journey and help us execute our vision for what and where Sleepy Owl is going to go. So I think that's been, one of the biggest learnings for us. The other thing is that, I think while, we even held Cold Brew close to our heart and we said, okay, we want to be the sort of, the people pioneering this new concept. I think, you shouldn't hold on to ideas like that too closely as well and be willing to mold, sort of, who you are, right? So in fact, when we started our name or our company was called Sleepy Owl Cold Brew Coffee LLP. Biggest mistake was to actually register an LLP in the first place. But as lawyers, I can't believe
that's a whole different conversation. I agree.
We messed that up. With our first round of investment, we had to convert our LLP to a private limited, and that was a whole different, hassle. But we went from Sleepy Owl Cold Brew Coffee LLP to Sleepy Owl Coffee Private Limited. But now we prefer Sleepy Owl. Not even Sleepy Owl Coffee, because I think as the brand is growing and building itself, we have to, sort of let go of the idea that we're restricted to something, right? We have, now our mission and our sort of goal is not even aligned towards specifically making India, a coffee drinking nation. It's about bringing the best of products around food and beverage to customers in a convenient, delightful, and bringing it to them in a manner they haven't seen before, right? And that doesn't necessarily only revolve around the product itself, but even the packaging experience, even the way you view, an existing product. We're trying to change all of that, right? So another week you'll see something very interesting from the Sleepy Owl family, and I think again, our product, you'll say, oh wow, this exists, and so many people are doing it. But I think when you experience it, you'll be like, okay, no one's done it like this, So that's kind of our way of looking at things.
I think that last part is so interesting, right? Because oftentimes what you start off as, and you're right, in many ways, what you kind of built out is the delivery system can be far simpler, far more interesting than what you always had in the F&B space. In many ways, that's been the core of your brand, and not necessarily how everybody else has gone coffee first. You've gone delivery first. And so that's actually a very interesting way to put it. And I look forward to see what else you're kind of building into it. But before we start winding up on the show, there's the last part of the show, which is generally random. It's supposed to be random, and they always have the same set of questions. My producers are tired of me introing this segment exactly like this. I can hear a couple of them laughing, or rather see a couple of them laughing in front of me. So what do you spend a lot of time doing outside of Sleepy Owl? What keeps you excited beyond that, or what takes up your time?
I think I'm during my university days and school days, I've always been a sports person. And if it were, up to me in school, I think I'd be neither a lawyer nor an entrepreneur. I'd be a sports person, because I think I really, really enjoy both playing and watching and following sport. So I do end up golfing once a week, playing football twice a week. Mostly post work at night is when football happens. And, a couple of times a week, my co-founders and I go for CrossFit near our workplace.
Nice.
So I think that takes up a lot of time, because all of us believe that you need to take out time for yourself to, do things that you love if you want to come back and feel more productive at work. At home, I have 9 cats and 3 puppies that take up a significant amount of my home time. I think it was
you're only the second person I know apart from me who has ever had, I think, pets in the double digits in their house. I grew up with 13 dogs. My grandmother had a problem. So I grew up with 13 dogs. So it's the first time hearing somebody else who has as many at home.
Sweet. Yeah, once we hit the 6-7 number, I was insistent that we get to double digit. I was like, we're already doing so much. We'll get there. And, it's been fun because, Varun, I think all of them are rescues. And I realized that, there is a sort of, innate passion and happiness that I get when we see that we've been able to make a difference to the lives of animals. And it's all started during COVID. When we got one and then one more and then one more. And I think that keeps me thoroughly busy in my personal time at home. I think prior to my pets, I would spend a lot of time, reading or listening to podcasts and doing that. I think that's significantly gone down in the last 6 months with the additions. But I think in the coming year, I want to carve out more time to do that again, because I do miss it. But let's see how we do that with
everything else. Which is actually interestingly my next question to you is that what have you watched, read, or listened to in recent times that you'd recommend? Considering you've taken less time on that, is there still something you've been able to catch up on?
Not as much, man. I actually, one of the things that I do now is I'll be honest, I only heard one of your podcasts till now. But every time I get on a show and do a podcast, I try and devour as much content of the person I've done a podcast with. So most recently I did a very interesting podcast with Arjun Vaidya, direct to 1 billion consumers. And, I'd heard one of his podcasts prior to, but I think I've heard everything on that and on that now. And it's phenomenal to, do that because I get to learn from so many other founders as well. Right. So with podcasts, I think my discovery has gone down from discovering new things myself. But once I'm on a show, I think it's always amazing to prior to the release of our show, I would have most likely watched all of your podcasts. And that's fun. And I'm looking forward to that. Reading, not so much, man. I haven't read, anything that is super fascinating. The little bit of time I get, I follow my newsletters and I try and pick up 1 or 2 interesting articles, whether it's a Tim Ferriss or a James Clear. Just get those emails, and I try and maximize on reading that content. So I haven't picked up a book in a while. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the new year. And hopefully I'll get back onto the reading spree.
And the last question is generally a spin on the name of the show. And considering what you said about just your learnings, I think I want to spin on that. I think what I think our focus on reinventing how we consume things is never going to die, because in many ways that's what you guys have done.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, I think a part of us now in the last 3 months believes performance marketing is dead. Definitely not. Definitely not advertising. But we've like many others faced significant challenges in the performance marketing side of it, and that's where I realized that building an organic brand or having organic brand conversations and delighting your customers beyond paid advertising, right? And something we've done consistently. And like I said, right, it's even our packaging. When you order D2C, at least the experience that we try to give our customers is we advertise to them, but in subtle ways get our messaging across, right? And I think that's been phenomenal for us overall.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Arman. Thanks for coming on the show. And more than else, thank you for finding a gap which most of us didn't know that we actually had, and almost being like brand we now definitely do kind of keep in. I think I have corners in the house and across bags wherever you will find the hot brew even now. So thank you for building out the brand that you guys have, and all the best for the launch which you haven't revealed, which I will look forward to.
Perfect. Thank you, Varun. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
If you like this podcast and you want to listen to more podcasts like this, head over to the IVM Podcast website or app or wherever you get your podcast from and look at all the podcasts that IVM makes. There's some really fun stuff there.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam is joined by Dr. Gayatri Vasudevan from LaborNet Services. They discuss the challenges and opportunities faced by the informal labor sector in India. On the Life Manifesto, Zarina teaches us how to deal with self-abandonment. On Smarter with Sid, we take a look at what happened over 100 years ago in the 1920s, where the situation was pretty similar to our 2020s. Agriculture played a very vital role in the flourishing of human civilization. Dr. Rajiv and Manik Deshmukh talk about this phenomena on Marathi Khidkitun. The lion is not a pet animal, but it can be adopted by a zoo. On Hansavani, we hear about the strange man who was keen on experiencing the grandeur of the lion. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, do tell a friend. The word of mouth absolutely is essential to us. Don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms that you've been listening to. And also, I'd like to ask everybody to check us out on YouTube. We have a number of channels going. You can find all of them on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intel. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa Vaisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM Podcast app or the website or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.